Good morning.
Good morning.
We have a good crowd. So I'm Alan Newman. I'm chief of the National Gallery's Division of Imaging and Visual Services. Welcome to the National Gallery on this second day of IIIF Week in DC. I believe it's a national phenomenon. At least we have people from far and wide. So the next 14, we have 15 talks, each for 15 minutes, whatever that means. And the next 14 talks will be by members of the growing IIIF community. And the community ranges, as well as the presenters, from Aberystwyth to New Mexico, and in between and beyond. I just wanted to say Aberystwyth because I spent the summer there in 1971. It's a beautiful place. But you'll hear more about the Welsh Library a little later. And now we have one museum that is part of the community of the IIIF, and that's the Yale Center for British Art, with hopefully many more to come. So I was looking back at Tom Kramer's presentation that he made at the CNI in 2011, and that was at the dawn, if 4 years ago is the dawn, of the IIIF community. And it was formed by 6 research libraries, the BNF, the BL, Cornell, Los Alamos, the National Library of Norway, which has an incredible collection. They've been digitizing, I think they hold the world's digitization record, and Oxford and Stanford. So the vision then was pretty well formed, and many of the things that they were talking about are actually here. So there was an image and a presentation API, a call for use cases for interoperable image delivery, and the building of powerful image viewing tools, both inside the community and outside, which can be used as pieces in an erector set. So around that time, the National Gallery was studying how best to distribute our collection images to the public and solve a universal problem among museums and among image requesters. On average, scholars and students would send a fax in or a phone call and make a request for an image, and then they had to wait months to receive the image. And worse yet, they had to pay for the privilege. So the privilege of an image of a work in the public domain. They hadn't all read Ken Hama's seminal essay on that, as most of us have. So we made an about face around that time. We were actually building a system that's using off-the-shelf stock photography software, and we liked everything it did except for the money collecting part, so we just asked the vendor to take out anything to do with money. And while they were doing that, I was working with our lawyers to write our policy, our open access policy, and we launched in March 2012. We're at images.nga.gov. We launched with 20,000 open access images, all publication quality, and we've grown since then in 3.5 years to 45,000. So these images are self-serve downloads, and they come usually with our reproduction guide, which lets authors who need not know anything about pixels take that to their publisher or their art director and make sure that the reproduction will bear some resemblance to the work of art. No forms, no conditions, do anything you want with it. And very recently, we soft launched version 2. We're in pre-publicity now, so if you want to try it out, please do. But don't write about it yet because we're still testing. Lots of new features. The two that we like the most are no registration. You just go there and download. And for the authors, again, to make things easy, you can download directly into PowerPoint. And so we have 1.5 million downloads since we opened. So these two worlds, those of content providers and those of people who are making tools to enhance content and permit sharing for content like the IIIF, they need each other. I think that we gave ArtStore and Google 45,000 images. We want to do more. We'd like to see the metadata maintained over time. So I think what we will do in the future is put out an API so the aggregators can download updated metadata and images, because images are constantly, whether it's a conservation treatment or we're fortunate enough to get our hands on a great painting that hasn't come off the wall in 2 years. They're always being updated. But in the end, all of these collections, and I'm sure Tom is going to use the word many times, are silos until you have interoperability. We do want to have interesting tools built around NGA images, just as the IIIF does, and API makes that possible. Basically, the use cases are fairly straightforward, although I'm sure there are dozens that we haven't thought of yet or really need to be written up. But in the museum community, we're constantly sharing the same group of images and sometimes working remotely with authors not on site. And a standard set of images where we can do things like we've seen done in the Mirador demonstration, whether it's annotation or pan zoom or any of the other tools that are there, can help any research that's being planned for an exhibition, a publication, educational programs. So I think to get the greatest value for museums, we need to participate. We need to make our intellectual property available as freely and easily as possible. And then perhaps in a few years we'll be in a place where we can be full partners and take real value out of the IIIF. I'm honored to introduce our next speaker, who is Tom Kramer. Here's his slide, and he's the chief technologist at the Stanford Library.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you, Alan. That was a wonderful introduction, and I'd particularly like to thank the National Gallery of Art for hosting this meeting. We've been kind of flying around the world, inviting ourselves to various places, and when we suggested several times in front of Alan that perhaps it would be lovely to do something in DC or New York, he leapt at the opening. It's been a tremendous amount of work for him and his team and his colleagues, and it's a fantastic room, so thank you very much. My name is Tom Kramer. I am, in fact, the Chief Technology Strategist at the Stanford University Libraries, and I have been working with many of the other people who are in this room today on something that has become to be known as IIIF. And Alan used a couple of keywords throughout his introduction as community, and I think just a quick show of hands, how many people this is their first real exposure to IIIF? They might know how to spell it, but that's about it. Okay, how many people have seen IIIF before and are here to learn more or help represent it? Presumably that's everyone else. how many people have actually implemented IIIF in some way, at the very early stages to all the way through to production? And then how many people have been to a IIIF working group meeting actually defining the standards, the approaches, developing the software? Okay. I could see all of that and none of you could, but it was very interesting. It's about 50-50 with people who have heard about it before versus their first exposure, and roughly 20% of the room is actually actively working on it and helping shape it through the working group. So throughout today, as part of the community, we have a clever ploy, which is to engage the audience as much as possible, because we want everyone who held up their hand in the first part to be people who held up their hands at the second question at the next meeting. So we've got a series of presentations on not only what IIIF is and how it works, but also speakers from various different domains and institutions to talk about what's in it for them and how it's applicable. So we hope you'll participate. Simeon Warner will be facilitating 2 audience spotlight sessions. So if you have a question or if you have a suggestion or if you have an epiphany at any point, please make sure to catch Simeon during the open audience spotlight questions. And you might start thinking about what your questions are as we go. So I'm going to start off with what is IIIF, besides a wonderful acronym. And, okay, too many, the mouse got replaced. There we go. The fundamental premise is that images are very important. They're one of the primitive information carriers on the internet today. They're valuable for cultural heritage writ large, for research, and for memory organizations. So basically, images are the key to transmitting most of the information content, or a majority of the information content, for all sorts of different domains and types of media. So everything from statues to manuscripts, books, archives, newspapers, sheet music, visual art resources, cartography, scrolls. An image is basically how you can represent that on the internet today. Sorry. The problem is, from research and memory organizations, that image delivery is actually rather hard. From a personal standpoint, at Stanford University, we're getting some radio interference here. It's always painful to look back at your earlier digital collections work. This is probably a vintage 2008, and this is an image gallery at Stanford University. When this came out, absolutely fantastic state of the art. This is an image of a lithograph from the Reed Dennis collection, and it's the burning of San Francisco after the 1906 quake. And so at the time that we got into working with deep zoom images, we said, this is great. Let's figure out how to do this. And after a course of many, many months, we produced this interface. So it's pretty nice. We have a commercial image server on the back end serving JPEG 2000s. We've got kind of deep zoom, wonderful controls up here that allow zooming, panning, and rotating. You can see the performance, which the audiences would have been more tolerable of in 2007 is maybe not as performant as you would like today. And there's a wonderful series of everything requires lots and lots of clicks, right? This took months for an A team of software developers and library technologists to figure out what we were talking about, to understand, and to implement. And this was 5 to 6 years ago. And finally, the ultimate room. And we're still running it. Why? And it's because, whoops, don't look at that yet. That's the future. This is the past. This is the dark present. I'm doing a consulting trick as to tell you how sick we all are before I tell you what the answer is. So one is, I am locked into my image delivery software. So it's once I implement something, I had a crack team of more resources than I'm probably ever going to get again without making a major case to management. We implemented something, and it's very difficult to think about how I might change to a new software platform. Do I have to reformat all of my images? Do I have to implement another image server? Do I have to implement another image client? That's just an awful lot of change. I do see these wonderful best-in-class image interfaces from particularly the commercial sector. You can tell we're nonprofit in most of what we do because we are really show poorly compared to the people who are making money off deep zoom, fantastic pan, rotate, and very rich interactive displays. I'd like some of that for my institution. And by the way, we're not part of the commercial sector, so I don't want to actually hold my entire budget hostage to being able to procure and implement this. I would love to have deep zoom, fantastically rich and detailed images where I could see with this level of detail individual brushstrokes or cracks in the patina of an individual piece of art. And I want to be able to show that on a mobile interface as well as a desktop interface. I would like to be able to visually compare objects across my collection, not just look at images as individual atomic elements. I'd also like to do that with things that are not in my collection, but perhaps are available on the open web from other institutions. Once I publish something to the web, is it possible to find it again? Can users cite it as part of their research or as part of a publication? Can they easily share it and return to the same state, the same view, the same construct, comparing multiple images? I would like to allow some next generation technology. What if someone wants to actually annotate the image, if they understand or do figure identification or transcription? What if I'm interested in actually crowdsourcing descriptions or producing a scholarly apparatus around my image-based resources? What if my images are something that others might want to blog about or reproduce in a virtual collection, either in my own website or a remote website? How can I actually facilitate the syndication of images throughout the open web? But I don't actually want to lose control of them. What if I republish the image, or I enrich the description, or the change in license, or a change in attribution? Can I do something that still lets images enjoy the benefits of the web, but not be locked down to an individual, not locked down to my individual website, behind paywall or locked behind an individual image application? And finally, that's an awful lot to do. Aren't other people already doing this? Isn't there a best practice here? I really don't want to have to invent any of this. So that's really kind of a state of play of the internet today. In short, image delivery is actually still hard. Image delivery can often be slow, both in terms of performance and in terms to implement. It's expensive. It's disjointed for users. It's disjointed from a technology perspective. It's disjointed from the global commonwealth of cultural heritage institutions. And frankly, it's often quite ugly. And everyone suffers because of it. Our institutions suffer because of the expense and because of the opportunity cost of not doing best-in-class delivery. The technologists suffer because they might implement a point solution and yet it doesn't scale or port to other environments. And our patrons suffer because they have to cope and navigate across multiple disjointed and multiply feature-lacking use cases. This is why IIIF was created. In short, IIIF, the vision is to create a global framework by which any image-based resource, any of those things that you saw on the earlier slide, and many of the things that are not represented on that slide, that could be served from any participating institution in a standard way using any compatible underlying image server for display manipulation and annotation in any web application in the future, those that exist today, those that don't even exist, to any user on the web. And further, that with a set of world-leading cultural heritage and research institutions, we've moved from tens of millions to hundreds of millions of high-class images, supported by a rich and growing suite of software tools, and that actually use the best of current image delivery technology and embrace the open standards of the web, rather than creating a silo, thank you, Alan, or something particular to the cultural heritage domain. Can we actually ride the steam train of innovation on the internet in general? And to toggle out, where are we today? While Stanford is still running our legacy image server, one of the things that we have today is IIIF running, and we're actually drawing images, in this case, from 3 different repositories. There you see 4 different windows with deep zoom for a variety of different individual item types. See what happens, that'll come back. For a variety of different individual item types. And if in fact I want to interact with these images, if I want to display these images from multiple different repositories, I think we have something coming from a museum at Harvard whose image server might not be up at the moment. Coming from a different image repository at Harvard, coming from the University of Freiburg in Switzerland, and something coming real-time from the Bibliothèque Nationale of France. And if I am interested in looking at these things in context, I might want to zoom out. What are these gentlemen looking at? Oh, well, it's sort of, these are IIIFers looking at the state of image delivery in the past. And in fact, it's actually part of a complex multi-page object where I can zoom through and see in multiple different displays. So that's sort of a taste of the past and a taste of the present for what we're building today. So how does this actually work, Windows? No, I'm kidding. So what is IIIF? Fundamentally, it's a community of like-minded institutions that are trying to collectively create this future. The focal point of the community's activities are developing a standard set of shared APIs, application programming interfaces, that define standard ways that systems can talk to each other for trafficking in images. Furthermore, the APIs are great, but we're developing a set of software to actually manifest those APIs and deliver value to both institutions and patrons, and a collective effort to expose interoperable content on the web. At this point, I have many, but not all of the institutions that are actively participating in IIIF. It is truly a global spread. With national leaders participating, we have something like 10 to 12 national or state libraries that are actively participating in the initiative, a growing number of research institutions, including some well-regarded universities, a small but growing number of museums, important aggregators such as Artstor, DPLA, and Europeana, and a growing number of projects, which are increasingly looking at things like IIIF as a way that they can get access to the rich resources of these cultural institutions and lay value-added services, applications, and research on top. Starting in 2012, we had just really the core members of the working group on IIIF Discuss, which is the Google group. I encourage anyone who is interested in actively participating after this meeting to go and join that. And what we're looking at is something that looks like geometric growth. For the first part of 2015, we're just shy of 200 members. And how does all of this actually work together? And this is the API and the silo slides that Alan was referring to. So kind of in a traditional world without APIs, you have a bunch of individual image applications, each talking to their individual image repository on the back end. Every individual site is a silo, every application is a one-off, and every user is forced to cope with 4 or 5 different image applications if they want to get content from these materials. So here's the silo slide. This is what we say to users. We might have a catwalk going across the silos. We espouse the value of cooperation, but really each of us is our own world in unto ourselves. And what happens is once you begin to introduce APIs or the standard way of talking between your image content and your image applications, you can then use one content store to export and embed content in third-party applications. You can still have your customized rich application for delivery of your Purple content, but then you might also export it to remote annotation and viewing environments. And then if multiple different institutions and multiple different image sources all subscribe to the same APIs, not their own APIs, you begin to get this fabulous framework and ecosystem where content from any source can end up in any destination, and you can do wonderful mixing and matching and really derive the benefits of a networked information ecosystem. There are 2 principal APIs to IIIF. There's a blue one and a red one. There is an image API, which allows you to get the pixels. John Stroop from Princeton University is going to talk more about that this afternoon. And there is a second API, which Alan mentioned, which is the presentation API. And this gives you just enough structure, administrative, and descriptive metadata to drive a remote viewing experience. Rob Sanderson from Stanford will be going in more detail to this later this afternoon as well. And just briefly to conceptualize what we're talking about, for the image delivery API, through a single URL, kind of consistently patterned, you can take an image, you can grab a region of interest, you can resize it, you can rotate it, you can request parameterized delivery for quality, and you can specify a format. With these 6 or 7 simple operations, we believe they meet 80% of the use cases that we've identified, common use cases for delivery of content over the internet. The presentation API has a relatively simple but powerful model, and it basically gives you the structure and the properties of your object or your series of images to say, here are the pages of a newspaper, here are the sections of a newspaper, here are the series of images describing this piece of sculpture, along with things like label, description, license, attribution, and links to further information. We're going to show throughout the day some of the compatible software that's blossomed, not only from the image servers, where we have 7 or 8 distinct image viewing platforms that are now capable of supporting IIIF, either natively or through adapters, a growing number of image clients, which provide you with that deep zoom and pan interface, and fantastic clients like Mirador, the Welcome Player, and the Internet Archive Book Reader, which can be adapted. The wonderful, powerful thing about the APIs is because the stripes are each working at different levels of the intersection, you can mix and match these players in any combination you want. You might want to run IIP Image Server with OpenSeaDragon or IIP MovieViewer on top of Loris. So why do this? Besides it's wonderful to get together, it's a wonderful pushpin map, what's actually in it for me? Why are the participants in IIIF actually attracted by it? So first and foremost, it's that ability to go from the legacy Stanford Digital Collection website with kind of the clunky vintage 2007 interface to rich contemporary image delivery. Second, it gives you the ability to plug and play your server and your client software. So you can do that across time. There are some institutions that are actually have multiple different image silos within their institution. IIIF is a way that they can actually serve all of their content out through a common portal or common interface without having to do systems integration or content migration on the back end. 3 is you can publish once and you can reuse often. Instead of giving someone a massively chunky file via FTP or a hard drive, they can actually hit that simple URL at the top. They can get a lightweight derivative, or if this image server allows on the back end, they can get the master TIFF file. You no longer have to worry about trafficking your images over the internet because basically this is image streaming. 4 is you can remix content from multiple places. As we showed briefly in the Mirador demo, I can actually bring in content from any arbitrary number of providers of image content on the internet. And for people who are studying multiple domains or have content of interest across multiple silos, this is a fantastic tool for bringing it together. 5 is it enables citing and sharing. That URL is consistent and persistent for users. So not only can I reference it in my research and my publications, I can actually share it with confidence and get down to the same region of interest and exact view that I was looking at when I bookmarked it and forwarded it to colleagues. 6 is it's annotation friendly. Rob Sanderson may talk about this a little bit more, John Stroop may do a little bit more, but for the emerging framework of actually annotating content on the web, IIIF has been designed from its inception to be able to support these. 7 is that while open access is great, and IIIF certainly advances that, there is also support for attribution and for access control. So for those of you who have more complex use cases, which include Stanford, we can not only publish a certain amount of content, we can also restrict content or provide necessary hurdles for attribution when required. And then 8, I think, is really the power of community, is we can join a global network of providers who are working together not only to provide a rich set of image resources, but to provide a wonderful cohesive experience for our users and a growing market for software providers who might want to provide a tool not just for Stanford or the National Library of Norway or the BNF, but collectively for the world's leading cultural heritage institutions. So one of the really cool things about IIIF is we're at the very beginning. As Alan said about the NGA's wireless, we're building it now. There is more that's going to come in the future than we've done in the past 3 years. This is a screenshot of Rashmi Singhal, who is sitting, I believe, in the back somewhere, who is demonstrating Mirador to some colleagues at the Fogg Museum, where they've got this wonderful video wall. And they were saying, hey, well, what would that look like if you took IIIF and Mirador and actually projected it onto the big screen, the big touch screen, which is interactive? What might this mean for pedagogy? What might this mean for exhibits and for teaching? These are things that we're just beginning to collectively understand and collectively advance. So throughout today, as you listened about what IIIF is, where it's going, how it works, please also think about the things that we haven't thought about yet. How might you apply this in your domain? What are interesting use cases, killer applications, rich content that could and should be exposed via IIIF? And I hope through the questioning and through the networking sessions during the breaks, you'll speak to any of the people who raise their hands that are involved with IIIF, and collectively we can advance this to the next stage. So thank you very much, and with that, I turn it over to the next speaker.